She stood behind the counter, her heart racing as she wiped down the coffee machine. The small cafe buzzed with the sounds of chatter and clinking cups. Sarah had worked there for 2 years, and every day felt like a new adventure, filled with the laughter of customers and the smell of fresh-brewed coffee. But today was different. The door swung open, and in walked a man who seemed to suck the warmth from the room. He was tall, with an air of confidence that felt heavy, yet beneath it all was a subtle hint of something unsettling. His clothes were crisp, his shoes polished to a shine. Sarah noticed he scanned the cafe with cold, sharp eyes as if he were assessing a battlefield. She swallowed hard, suppressing an inexplicable chill that crept down her spine. She asked, forcing a smile as she approached him. "Coffee, black," he replied, his voice smooth yet commanding. There was an expectation in his tone, as if he was used to ordering people around. Sarah hesitated. There was something about him that unsettled her, a feeling deep in her gut that made her hesitate, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "I'm sorry, but we're out of the dark roast today," she said, instinctively trying to find a way to refuse his order. His eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment she held her breath. It felt as if the air was thickening around them, making her words come out heavier. Normally, she would never turn down a customer. Everyone deserved a cup of coffee, no matter who they were, but something felt off. "Fine, then give me a latte," he snapped, impatience creeping into his tone. Sarah hesitated again, looking down at the cash register. The regulars, chatting at their tables, suddenly fell silent, their eyes flicking to the two of them. She felt their stares burn into her, questioning, waiting. "I really can't," she stammered. He laughed, a low, harsh sound, as if he found her amusing. That's when she decided, maybe it was the pride deep inside her, maybe it was her sense of justice. Either way, she shook her head firmly. He glared at her, his expression darkening. The chatter resumed in hushed whispers, eyes darting between the barista and the stranger. Sarah could feel the tension in the room, like it was tightening around her heart, but she stood her ground. He sneered, leaning closer to her across the counter. His voice dropped dangerously low, as if sharing a dark secret. She didn't flinch, not really. His expression shifted. He didn't expect that response. Her roommate Jenna had always said that standing up for yourself to people like him was a dangerous game, but in that moment it didn't matter. Her independence felt powerful enough so to push past the fear. A hush fell over the cafe. Even the hum of the espresso machine, though broken, seemed to die down. The man's eyes narrowed again, and Sarah saw something terrifying flash across his face. It wasn't anger, it was something colder. "Go ahead," he said with an ominous calm. "Piss me off." Just then Sarah heard a voice from behind her, a soft whisper among the staff. She turned slightly, catching snippets of conversation from her coworkers. Some were whispering his title, words that felt foreign and sharp. CEO, major investor. Her heart raced, not because of fear, but because of realization. This man wasn't just a stranger, he had a reputation. The kind that could bend people to their wills, that could hurt or destroy lives without a second thought. And yet here she was, standing against him, shaking off every warning bell ringing in her head. "I don't care who you are," Sarah said, summoning all of her courage. He echoed, his brow arching in a blend of surprise and hostility. "You have no idea what people like me can do if they want." "Maybe," she breathed, a knot tightening in her stomach. Yet despite the fear, a rush surged through her. Defiance, determination. The atmosphere surrounding them felt electric. The cafe held its breath. Even her coworkers were wide-eyed, unsure of what would unfold next. Would he make a scene? Would he lash out? But instead of fury, something peculiar happened. A smirk crept onto his face, cheeky yet predatory. "Listen, maybe you should think twice about being so bold," he said. And with that, he turned, striding towards the door, confident in his departure. But as he reached the exit, he paused. "You'll regret this," he called back, his voice echoing off the walls. The moment he left, the cafe erupted. Customers picked up their conversations, laughter returning among friends, but Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding. Jenna, her coworker, stared at Sarah, eyes wide. "You stood up to him, that's incredible." "No," Sarah admitted, her breath finally steadying. "Not really. Bad doesn't cover it. He's ruthless, a shark in a suit. One of the wealthiest men in the country," Jenna explained, disbelief etched on her face. A mix of pride and fear coursed through Sarah. "I didn't know, I just..." "Not many people have the guts to say no to him," Jenna continued, her voice lowering as if they were sharing a secret weapon. For the rest of the day, murmurs swirled around the cafe. Customers who had witnessed the confrontation exchanged stories and theories. Some admired Sarah, others thought she was reckless, but she felt alive, electric, like she had created a spark in the mundane rhythm of her day-to-day life. As the sun began to set, casting golden rays through the windows, a knot of dread started to form in the pit of Sarah's stomach. What if he returned? What if she faced the repercussions of her choice? The next morning, Sarah stepped into the cafe with a sense of déjà vu. The familiar scent of roasting coffee filled the air, but everything felt different. Conversations felt hushed, eyes darted to the door as if they were expecting someone ominous to walk through. "Hey," Jenna asked as she brewed a fresh cup. Sarah shifted, a pang of recognition striking her. "Yeah, he's in headlines for launching a new project, something huge. They say it's almost worth billions." Suddenly, the chill returned. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she poured customer drinks. She half expected him to swagger in at any moment, ready to confront her, deliver some kind of revenge. And then the bell jingled. The door opened, but it was another customer. Her heart sank in disappointment, yet relief washed over her. Maybe she wasn't ready to face him after all, but then, just as she thought she was safe, the door swung open again. This time, all the air seeped from the room. Nathan walked in, wearing that same cold confidence, eyes sweeping over the cafe like a hawk. He paused just inside the door, and for a moment, it felt like the world stopped spinning. Her heart raced as he approached the counter with an unsettling calm, each step echoing in her ears. He leaned casually over the counter, staring right at her. Sarah's breathing quickened, panic rising in her chest. She asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I want to know what makes you tick," he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Jenna, standing next to Sarah, shot her a worried glance. "I really don't think now's a good time," she whispered, trying to pull Sarah back. But Sarah didn't move. "I'm not afraid of you," she declared, surprising herself with the strength that filled her voice. Nathan smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Good." As he leaned in closer, she searched his face for any signs of anger, but there was none. There was something else, a chilling acceptance. "You've piqued my interest." Confusion washed over Sarah. Was he really here to intimidate her or something else entirely? "I run a company that thrives on courage, on those who refuse to back down," he said, straightening up. Those words hung in the air, thick and heavy. She didn't know how to process them. Was this a twisted game, or was he genuinely offering her something? Everything inside her screamed to walk away, but a tiny spark of curiosity ignited within her. "I'm not interested in working for you," she finally replied, her voice steady. He chuckled softly. "Not yet, at least, but you will be." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving a trail of confusion and tension behind him. The buzzing cafe was now a sanctuary turned battlefield, and for Sarah, the victory from the day before felt far from secure. Jenna looked at her, disbelief etched on her face. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her mind racing. But as the day wore on, one thing began to settle within her. Maybe standing up to Nathan Ray's wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just the beginning of a much larger narrative, one where courage and fear intertwined, leaving a trail of uncertainty and possibility in its wake, and she was determined to see where this path would lead. The bell above the cafe door chimed, announcing the arrival of a customer, but this one felt different. The low hum of chatter dulled, laughter faded into a hushed whisper. Heads turned and all eyes fell on him, the man who walked in with an air of authority as if he owned the place. A slight chill settled in the atmosphere. Sarah stood behind the counter, her hands frozen mid-motion, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She could feel her heartbeat quicken, like a drum echoing in her ears. It wasn't just the sharp lines of his tailored suit or the confident grin on his face. It was something deeper that sent an unease through her. She managed to say, forcing a smile despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Just a coffee, black," he replied, but there was a weight to his voice and expectation that hung thick in the air. It felt almost like a command. She hesitated, staring at him for a heartbeat longer. The cafe felt like a stage, and she was the only performer caught off script. "I'm sorry, but we just ran out of dark roast," she said, desperate to keep her voice steady. In that moment, his eyes flickered with irritation, but under that annoyance lay a dark, predatory glint. He echoed, pursing his lips as if tasting the words. Sarah shook her head. "I wish I were. I can offer you something else, though." "No," he said sharply, his smile fading. "I want a black coffee." A familiar warmth filled her cheeks, stirring a rebellious fire within. Sarah took a deep breath, holding onto that defiance as if it were a lifeline. "I can't do that." His expression shifted. For a fleeting moment, disbelief flashed in his eyes. It was then his true nature began to emerge like shadows slipping from the corners of a room. He asked, his voice low and crisp, coiling around each word like smoke curling from a flame. It was in that instant that the world around them faded. Tables went quiet, chairs scraped against the floor hushed now. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she planted her feet firmly, making a choice that silenced her racing heart. "I'm not interested in titles," she said boldly. He stared for a moment, something wild flickering behind his gaze. "You will be," he replied, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Just then, a murmur floated through from the staff behind her. "He's the head of Ray's Industries." The words hit her like a slap, echoing with force. CEO, investor, powerful. A feeling of dread coursed through her veins, clashing with the rush of adrenaline. This man wasn't just a customer, he was a titan of force that could alter lives with a single word, yet there she stood, defiantly staring him down. "Look, I can't serve you if you're going to treat me like this," she said, keeping her voice even. He leaned in slightly, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "You think you can refuse me? I'm not scared of you," she shot back, the strength in her voice surprising even her. A sudden tension rippled through the space, crackling above the low hum of the cafe. You could almost feel the collective anticipation, maybe even fear. In that moment, it seemed like the world had halted just for her, testing her resolve. The others watched, likely wondering if she had taken on a beast too large. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he stepped back. "Suit yourself," he said casually, as if he were nothing more than a passing breeze. And with that, he turned and walked out, his presence slipping from the cafe as quickly as he had arrived, but leaving a trail of uncertainty behind him. Relief flooded through Sarah, but it was swiftly followed by disbelief. What had just happened? A heavy weight settled on her chest as her coworkers approached, anxiety etched into their faces. Jenna, her close friend and coworker, whispered incredulously. "Yeah, I guess I did," Sarah replied, crossing her arms defensively. "But Jenna stammered, pacing back and forth as if a jolt of caffeine coursed through her. "You know, the guy who owns half the city," Sarah replied, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade, leaving behind a kaleidoscope of emotions: pride, fear, uncertainty. "You're either brave or really stupid," Jenna said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I just couldn't do it," Sarah said, her voice steadying as she spoke. Something about the way he ordered, like he was entitled to it. Days passed, but the memory of Nathan Ray's lingered like a dark shadow. Sarah found herself scanning the cafe each time the door opened, half expecting him to walk back in, fury crackling in the air. She thought about their brief encounter more than she'd like to admit. There was something unsettling yet thrilling about standing up to someone so powerful. Then one afternoon, as she was cleaning tables, the unmistakable jingle of the bell indicated another customer. Her stomach dropped as she turned to face the door. But this time a different man walked in, tall, with a sharp jaw and blue eyes that sparkled with recognition. He asked, looking around, heart pounding. She approached him cautiously. "That's me." He smiled warmly. "My name is Jonathan." Her heart sank. "Yes," he said, "he'd like to see you, not in the way you think." The words settled like stones in her stomach. Jonathan chuckled softly. A chance, fear clawed at the edges of her mind, mixed with a strange curiosity. To work with him. "Could use someone with your guts on his team," Jonathan replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. She shook her head, feeling the tension coil tighter. "I'm a barista." "Maybe," Jonathan said, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "But he doesn't want someone timid. He's looking for someone who isn't afraid of taking risks. Think about it." She hesitated, the weight of his words pressing on her. Part of her was fascinated by the idea working alongside someone like Nathan Ray's. Could it really lead to something greater? Yet another part of her screamed in defiance. The very thought of aligning with a man who had stirred such chaos made her stomach churn. "Let me think about it," she finally replied, the words tasting strange on her tongue. "Take your time," Jonathan said, turning to leave, "but don't take too long." As he walked out, a whirlwind of thoughts crashed into Sarah's mind. Would she be able to stand before someone like Nathan again? Could she face the very man she had called out? That night, sleep eluded her. As she lay there, staring at the ceiling, doubts tangled with dreams of opportunity. A life where she didn't wake up to the same cafe every day. A chance to escape her current routine and dive headfirst into something unknown. But at what cost? The following morning, she decided to walk the path she had avoided. She dressed in her best outfit, a blouse paired with slacks, a far cry from her usual casual barista uniform. Her heart raced as she approached the towering glass building that housed Ray's Industries. Each step felt heavy, as if she were walking through the very thoughts that had haunted her all night. What would he be like? Was it wise to dive into such a tumultuous world? The lobby was vast, with sleek marble floors reflecting the overhead lights. She walked to the check-in desk, her palms sweating. "I'm here to see Nathan Ray's," she said, her voice stronger than she felt inside. The receptionist, looking surprised, quickly called upstairs, relaying her presence. Sarah waited, her heart pounding like a drum. Finally, she was directed to the elevator. It felt like stepping into a cannon, ready to be launched into the unknown. With each floor, tension built in her chest, igniting a mix of nerves and anticipation. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space filled with shadows and towering glass walls that framed an impressive view of the city. There he was, Nathan. Behind a massive desk that seemed to take up the entire room, he looked powerful and imposing. Yet there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes as he leaned back, assessing her. "I'm glad you came," he said smoothly, his confidence wrapping around him like an impenetrable shield. She asked, refusing to let intimidation take hold. "Because you intrigued me," he replied, leaning forward with an almost magnetic energy. "Most people rush to please me." Sarah swallowed, the weight of his gaze making the room feel smaller. He asked, tilting his head like a predator sizing up his next meal. "Because I don't have experience in what you do," she replied, her pulse racing. He smirked, a quick flash of pleasure crossing his face. "Experience is overrated." The thought of stepping into a world that had felt completely alien began to take root. Was this a real opportunity, or merely a dangerous game he played? She asked, curiosity overriding her caution. "Work with me to innovate, to shake things up." As he spoke, something inside her sparked. Maybe this was what she needed, a chance to break free from expectations. But questions remained, swirling like smoke. "Failure is part of the game," Nathan said, his eyes glinting with excitement, but being afraid to even try. The boldness in him shook her resolve and ignited her dream of something more. Perhaps taking this chance was the key to unlocking doors she had never even imagined. "I'll think about it," she said, surprising herself with how firm the statement came out. He smiled, satisfied. As she left the building, the weight that had pressed upon her felt lighter. Possibilities danced in her mind. She had stood up to a giant and was now faced with an opportunity that could change her world. Sarah knew one truth: sometimes refusing to play by the rules leads to the most incredible adventures. And in that moment she chose to leap into the unknown, daring to take the risks that could finally set her free. The door swung open and the bell above it jingled, echoing through the small cafe. The chatter of patrons dimmed as a man walked in, his presence dominating the space. It wasn't just his height or the crisp suit that hugged his form, it was the energy around him that shifted the atmosphere, imbuing the air with a tense charge. Sarah stood behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine, her hands momentarily frozen. The moment he stepped into her line of sight, her heart raced, its rhythm dissonant against the calm murmur of morning coffee. This wasn't just any customer, something deep inside her stirred, a primal instinct warning her of what lay beneath his polished exterior. She asked, forcing the words out, a polite smile plastered on her face. "Coffee," he replied, his voice low and smooth. There was something in the way he said it, a hint of command that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Sure, she was used to dealing with all kinds of people, from grumpy regulars to loud tourists, but this man was different. Undeniably powerful, she glanced toward the dining area, sensing a collective anticipation from the other customers, their eyes glued to the unfolding drama. "Sorry," she said, shifting her weight. He replied, his brows knitting together, almost amused by her defiance. Panic flickered behind her eyes, but she pushed it down, unwilling to relent. Her voice trailed off, wishing she hadn't offered anything at all. He suggested, a smirk playing on his lips. She took a breath. "I really can't serve you a latte," she said firmly. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment the world outside seemed to blur. Did she really just refuse him? He asked sharply, leaning slightly closer to the counter, his presence enveloping her predator, assessing its prey. "Not really, and to be honest, I don't care," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her boldness. It was a truth that spilled out without thought, as if the instinct inside her was waking from a long slumber. A silence fell over the cafe, a collective gasp captured in the stillness. For once, it felt like time had stopped. Customers exchanged tentative glances, unsure of what would happen next. He chuckled, but there was no warmth to it. "You might want to reconsider that attitude," he said, his voice low and smooth like butter melting on a hot skillet. "I'm not afraid of you," she replied, the strength in her voice surprising even herself. For a moment something flickered in his eyes, anger, respect, she couldn't tell, but she could feel the tension vibrating through the room like an electric current. "I'll take my business elsewhere," he said, straightening and turning to leave, but before he walked out he paused and shot her one last look. "Enjoy your job while you can." With that, he stepped out into the bustling world beyond the cafe doors, leaving behind a thick silence that hung like a heavy fog. Jenna, her coworker, breathed, walking up beside Sarah wide-eyed. "I just thought he was rude," Sarah replied, still feeling the adrenaline rush through her body. "Rude? He's Nathan Ray's, the Nathan Ray's." It was then Sarah's heart sank. Images flashed in her mind, the man who had fought his way through corporate America, who had built an empire, who could turn lives upside down with a mere flick of his wrist. Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Oh my God, yes, he's in the papers all the time." Jenna exclaimed, her surprise palpable. Sarah's stomach twisted in knots. She had stood her ground against a titan, and now all she felt was fear. "I didn't know," she muttered, the gravity of her defiance weighing heavily on her. "You just refuse to serve a man who doesn't take no for an answer. This could get you into serious trouble," Jenna warned, glancing toward the door as if she expected him to come back any moment. Sarah wondered aloud, her pulse still racing. A few patrons murmured among themselves, discussing her boldness like a scene from a movie. But she couldn't shake the heavy feeling in her gut. What had she just done? As the next few days passed, the encounter replayed in her mind like a broken record, a constant loop of anxiety. Each time the bell jingled, dread twisted in her stomach, but Nathan never returned. Sarah tucked away her concern as the day rushed onward, but as she closed the cafe that night, locking the door behind her, a chill of uncertainty crept down her spine. Just as she turned to walk home, she heard a voice behind her, deep and commanding. She spun around, heart pounding. Nathan stood there, silhouetted by the fading light. It felt like the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. He asked, his tone unexpectedly calm, stripped of the tension from before. Yeah, I guess," she replied hesitantly. He gestured toward an alley beside the cafe. With every step she took beside him, her mind raced. What did he want? Was this the moment she'd regret? When they reached the alley, he leaned against a wall, looking out at the street as people passed by. "I didn't mean what I said earlier. Not really," he began, glancing at her, vulnerability flashing in his gaze. She repeated, taken aback. "I'm aware," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But this city is full of people who won't challenge me. They're afraid. I didn't see that in you." "So what?" Sarah asked, eyebrow raised, skepticism etched on her face. "Actually, yes," he replied, his expression earnest. "I'm starting a new venture, something that could change the industry. I want you on board." Her heart raced at the proposition. This was it. Before her lay an opportunity to leap into a world she had only glimpsed from afar, but the fear remained. "Why would I go into business with someone like you?" That scene was just a moment, he countered, eyes locking onto hers with intensity. What I see in you is potential. The stakes were high and her mind raced as she considered the weight of his words. Could this be a chance to escape the mundanity of her life, to become someone more than just a barista? The doubt crept in, unraveling her courage. I believe you are, he insisted, his voice unwavering. Just take a moment to think it over. You might regret not taking this chance. With those compelling words, he turned to leave. I'll give you a few days. Nathan slipped a business card into her palm. Each letter etched on the surface felt heavy with promise. As her fingers brushed against the sleek material, she felt tethered to something larger than herself. She called out, halting him in his tracks. He turned back, curiosity alive in his eyes. She asked, genuinely wanting to know. An ally, he replied, a spark igniting in his gaze. I need someone who won't bow down to pressure. With that, he walked away, leaving her standing in the alley, the card clutched tightly in her hand. The night air felt electric around her, charged with possibility. Days went by, filled with thoughts of Nathan and his offer. Sarah dove into a whirlwind of emotions, fear, excitement, uncertainty. Each moment was separated by the steady beat of her heart, echoing in the quiet corners of her mind. Could she really take this leap? Stepping into a world of power, money, and influence felt surreal, almost intimidating. But the prospect of being someone who could change the game ignited a fire within her heart. Finally, after days of restless pondering, she dialed the number on the card. It felt strange, so simple, yet so monumental. Nathan's voice boomed through the receiver, sending shivers down her spine. It's Sarah, she said, hugging herself tightly. The silence on the other end seemed to stretch for an eternity, but when he spoke again, emotion colored his voice. I knew you'd come around. As the call ended, her mind flooded with visions of that office, the games of power that danced along the edges of her thoughts. The following day, she arrived at Ray's Industries, her heart pounding in anticipation and trepidation. The lobby gleamed, and every corner seemed to pulse with energy. Nathan was waiting for her, a confident smile etched across his face. Welcome aboard, he said, as if folding her into a new world. Over the next few weeks, Sarah settled into her role. The thrill of challenges met her at every turn, and she learned how to navigate the corridors of power. Each project revealed layers of herself she never knew existed, pushing her boundaries and test her limits. Nathan became a mentor, yet he was not without his mysteries. On days when the weight of ambition felt heavy, she remembered the initial encounter, the refusal that changed everything. I'm glad you didn't back down that day, he once said as they worked late into the night. That spirit is what drives success. One evening, as they sat across from each other, spreadsheets sprawled between them, she finally found the courage to ask the burning question that had lingered in her mind. He looked down, contemplative. It's a game of power. Many would bend to it. You didn't. I respect that. His honesty struck a chord, illuminating the complex dynamics that governed their world. Months passed, and Sarah thrived in her role, carving out a legacy under Nathan's guidance. She felt invincible, yet never forgot the roots that had shaped her journey. The cafe visits turned into a fond memory, but on occasion she would stop by, if only to remind herself of where it all began. The familiar clang of cups, the warmth of regulars, the smell of coffee brewing. But now it was different. She summoned strength from those simple moments, fueled by a journey of transformation. One day, as she stood in line, she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she locked eyes with Nathan, who stood there grinning. He teased, raising an eyebrow. Just a reminder of where I started, she replied, smiling back. Good, never forget that, he professed, affirming the spirit that had once drawn them together. In that fleeting moment, Sarah realized the profound lesson from their shared journey. Refusing to serve him had sparked a sequence of events that forever changed her life. Choices rooted in courage often lead to the most unexpected of paths, leading toward unimaginable possibilities. As she stepped back into the world outside, the sunlight warmed her skin, illuminating a future that stretched beyond the confines of her former life, a testament to the power of standing tall, no matter how daunting the odds might seem. Each choice was a brushstroke on her canvas, crafting a masterpiece from a moment of defiance. The bell chimed as the door swung open, and Sarah glanced up from behind the counter, her hands still working at the coffee machine. Usually the early morning rush brought the familiar faces of regulars, the routine comfort of their small talk, but this time was different. In walked a man whose very presence seemed to alter the atmosphere of the cafe. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had an air about him that implied he didn't need to speak to command attention. The chatter from the few customers hushed, replaced by an almost palpable tension. Sarah felt her heart quicken. She had dealt with all types in her 2 years as a barista. This one, though, there was something unsettling about his confidence, something that sent a ripple of instinctive caution through her. She asked, trying to keep her tone steady, "Coffee?" "Black," he replied, his voice low and firm, carrying an undeniable authority. She hesitated, her smile faltering as she glanced down at the espresso machine. His eyes narrowed slightly, disbelief mixed with annoyance. His tone shifted, now laced with impatience, like she was wasting his time. Just the regular drip coffee, I guess, she replied, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. Just coffee. The corners of his mouth curled into an amused smirk, like he couldn't believe her audacity. Swallowing hard, something deep inside Sarah shifted. A sense of defiance ignited within her. I really can't serve you a latte or espresso because the machine is down. The moment those words left her lips, she felt the air grow heavy. The cafe, usually a haven filled with chatter and laughter, now hung in a silence thick enough to cut. The other customers, who had once been wrapped in their own conversations, now stared, waiting for the storm that seemed ready to roll in. He asked, leaning in slightly, and for a brief moment, a chill raced down Sarah's spine. His confidence morphed into a predator-like intensity. I don't really care, she replied, surprising even herself with the boldness in her voice. An audible gasp echoed from the small crowd around them, eyes darting back and forth as disbelief buzzed through the room. He leaned back, clearly taken aback, the amusement in his eyes flickering like a flame. You should care, he snapped, his tone suddenly sharp. Look, it's not personal, she said, for once feeling that she had to stand her ground. A silence fell heavy in the air, tension growing thicker as he studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl, but she refused to back down, the resolve hardening within her. Fine, I'll take my business elsewhere, he said coolly, turning to leave. Then something slipped through the walls of her mind, a whisper from her coworkers. He's the CEO of Ray's Industries, a billionaire, someone murmured. Suddenly, the weight of what she had just done crashed down on her. This man wasn't just any customer, he held power, influence, the kind that could ruin lives without a second thought. As he left the cafe, the collective murmurs of disbelief swirled around her, her coworkers' astonished faces reflecting her inner turmoil. Jenna, her friend and coworker, asked, all mixed with warning in her tone. Sarah trailed off, grappling with the storm of emotions swirling in her chest. Whatever you think, you may have just made a powerful enemy. Nathan Ray's is not someone to mess with, Jenna said, shifting uneasily. Pride battled with anxiety as Sarah scrubbed the counter, the conversations of the cafe still swirling around her like ghosts. She had always prided herself on standing up for what was right, but now she felt a creeping dread settle in her stomach as reality set in. What had she done? Over the next few days, jangled nerves echoed in the back of her mind. Each time the door opened, her heart raced, half expecting to see him walk back in, fury etched across his face. But the days turned into weeks and still nothing. The buzz in the air was palpable, a thrill of anticipation that tingled down her spine. She finally asked Jenna, they say Ray's Industries is expanding. Jenna replied, her eyes wide with excitement. It's supposed to be huge. Suddenly, Sarah felt a chill. What if Nathan returned? What if she was the reason he made changes? Later that night, as the cafe closed, Sarah locked up and stepped outside into the cool evening air. Alone with her thoughts, she replayed the confrontation over and over. Why hadn't he come back? Why did she feel like she had walked away from something monumental? Just as the questions began to swirl in her mind, she heard a voice behind her, deep, smooth, commanding. She turned, her heart dropping into her stomach. Nathan stood there, his posture exuding authority, like a king ready to reclaim his throne. I need to talk to you, he said, glancing around as if ensuring no one else was listening. She asked, her chest tightening. Let's move somewhere private, he suggested, gesturing toward a quiet alley beside the cafe. Every instinct in her told her to run, to find safety in the ordinary routine of her life, but curiosity overpowered fear. She followed him into the dimly lit alley, the weight of uncertainty heavy between them. She asked, crossing her arms, trying to appear braver than she felt. I want to apologize, he began, his voice unexpectedly soft. What happened the other week was not my intention. I just expect people to provide, and you, she echoed, incredulous. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration marring his otherwise composed demeanor. It's a rare quality to stand up to someone like me. Most people don't even try. She stared at him, taken aback. You admire it. Listen, he said, his voice firm yet sincere. I'm not used to being challenged, and I respect your confidence. The weight of his words sank in slowly. Was this really an apology? She pressed, the defenses still up around her heart. I came to see if you'd be interested in collaborating, he said, leaning in closer, each word like a promise suspended in the air. Her heart raced at the thought, a mixture of excitement and hesitation. Because you have guts, you didn't buckle. I need someone like that on my team for this venture of fresh perspective and fearless dedication. The idea swirled in her mind like a tornado of possibilities. This was a chance to step into a world she had only watched from afar, a chance to be part of something bigger. But could she really trust him? I don't know, she said slowly, uncertainty flooding her voice. Working with you could be, he nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. It could be. But it could also be the opportunity of a lifetime, Sarah. Think about it. You could help make real changes in the industry, he urged, a passionate intensity radiating from him. And just like that, her walls began to crumble. What if she could be a part of something significant? What if she could create a ripple effect in her life? Maybe there was a reason their paths had crossed in such an unexpected way. I'll think about it, she said finally, feeling her heart settle into a new rhythm, the fluttering of possibilities taking root within her. "Take your time," he replied with a slight smile, something softer in his gaze now. "But don't wait too long." With those words hanging in the air, he turned away, leaving her standing alone in the alley, the weight of the card he slipped into her hand grounding her to the moment. Days turned into a week, and with each passing day, the card burned in her pocket. She would pull it out, reading the elegant font of his name, and wonder what it would mean to step into a different life. Finally, one night, as she sat in her small apartment, struggling through her nightly routine, she made her choice. Gathering her courage, she dialed the number etched on the card. A few rings later, his voice answered, sending a shiver down her spine. "Nathan," she said firmly, determination blossoming inside her. "Come by tomorrow and we can discuss it," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. When the sun rose the next day, she was ready. The air felt electric as she stepped into the imposing building of Ray's Industries. Each step echoed her resolve, and her heart raced with anticipation and dread. When she reached his office, Nathan looked up from behind his desk, his eyes brightening. "Let's talk about what your role could be," he said, gesturing for her to sit. As they delved into their conversation, she felt the enormity of the opportunity opening up before her. He spoke of vision, of disruption, of challenging the norms in an industry that had grown stale. And as he spoke, her initial hesitations melted away, replaced by excitement. Over the following weeks, they dove headfirst into projects. Nathan taught her the intricate dance of navigating the corporate world, while she brought fresh ideas that revitalized their initiatives. Storms of sleepless nights and brainstorming sessions filled their days. Together, they built something extraordinary. And as Sarah's confidence grew, so did her bond with Nathan, transforming into a dynamic partnership more powerful than she had imagined. But as their success flourished, shadows emerged in the corners of their victory. The sheer weight of the business world pressed down on them, presenting unavoidable challenges. People whispered behind their backs, seeing Sarah as nothing more than a distraction to Nathan, a pawn to his game. And while she fueled the fire of innovation, doubts gnawed at her, particularly in moments when Nathan's gaze turned inward, clouded by the pressures of the corporate machine. Finally, one evening after a particularly grueling meeting, she summoned her courage to confront him. "You're changing, Nathan," she said, her voice steady, though nerves ratcheted through her gut. His eyes met hers, surprising vulnerability exposing his soul. "I'm not saying that," she replied, her heart pounding, "but you used to care more. Now it feels like you're fighting against something greater." He hesitated, the weight of her words heavy in the silence. "Maybe I've just learned to swallow my doubts to endure," he admitted, his tone softening. "Or maybe you need to remember why you started in the first place," she pressed gently. In that moment, the storm inside him quieted. "You're right," he said finally, a flicker of hope lighting his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me." Together, they forged ahead, navigating both the victories and obstacles that came their way. The partnership deepened, stitched together by threads of trust and understanding. They became stronger, not only as colleagues, but as friends, realizing that success was sweeter when shared with someone who understood the journey. As successes piled up, Sarah found herself standing at a unique crossroads. The power of her initial refusal forged a path to radical changes, both within herself and in the industry. She learned that standing up for what was right could lead to unexpected opportunities, and sometimes what seems like a small act of defiance can spiral into something incredible. In the heart of the city, beneath the towering skyline, she was no longer just a barista serving coffee. Now, she was a part of the world shaping the future. And every time she passed the cafe where it all began, she would smile, remembering the choice that led her to this extraordinary chapter in her life, a testament to the power of courage and resilience, proving that sometimes the bravest thing one can do is to refuse to back down. The bell above the cafe door jingled, a sound that usually brought with it the warmth of familiar faces and the smell of fresh coffee. But today, that sound felt ominous. Sarah looked up from behind the counter, and her heartbeat quickened when she saw him. He was tall, wearing a tailored suit that seemed to command the room. He walked in with an air of confidence that instantly changed the vibe of the cafe. Customers who were chatting and laughing fell silent, their eyes shifting toward him. Sarah caught her breath, feeling the tension thicken in the air. There was something unsettling about him, something that raised the hairs on the back of her neck. She managed to ask, forcing a smile despite the unease swirling inside her. "Coffee," he replied simply, his voice deep and smooth, but with an edge that hinted he was used to getting his way. She asked, instinctively trying to fill the silence with friendly banter, but her words felt flat. "Black," he said, as if that simple cup of coffee was his right and hers to provide without question. The knot in her stomach tightened as she glanced at the espresso machine. He raised an eyebrow, disbelief flickering across his face. "Out of dark roast. We have the regular brew. It's not as strong, but just coffee then," he interrupted, impatience creeping into his tone. Sarah hesitated. She didn't think he could sense it, but her gut was screaming. There was something off about him. She forced the words out, trying to keep her voice steady. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment she felt a chill race down her spine. The question hung in the air, a challenge laced with a promise of consequences. She felt the surrounding tables tense up, every customer suddenly invested in their exchange. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest and she took a breath. No, it's not that, Courage swelled in her chest. This was her cafe, her job. He snapped, leaning over the counter, his expression shifting from irritation to something darker. She met his gaze, the storm brewing beneath his smooth exterior, and whatever reservations she had about him vanished. Not really, she said, the boldness surprising even herself. And honestly, I don't care who you are. The room fell silent, the air thickening as customers held their breath. Sarah could feel all eyes on her, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. His expression darkened, surprise morphing into fury, but she held her ground. Fine, I'll take my business elsewhere, he snapped, turning to leave. But just before he reached the door, Sarah overheard a whisper from behind her. He's the CEO of Ray's Industries. Those words struck her like lightning and realization crashed over her. This man was not just any customer. He was someone with a reputation that could shatter lives and careers with a single decision. She called, but he was already gone, leaving that tension lingering in the air like smoke. Everyone began to talk at once, the excitement of what they had witnessed palpable. Jenna, her coworker, asked wide-eyed, I couldn't let him talk down to me, Sarah replied, shaking, adrenaline still rushing through her veins. You don't understand what you've done, Jenna said, glancing nervously toward the door. He's a force of nature. For the rest of the day, Sarah felt a pang of dread gnawing at her. What repercussions would follow? Would he come back? Terror mixed with a twisted sense of pride. She had stood her ground like a warrior in the face of a giant. But what if that giant decided to strike back? Days turned into a week. Every time the door jingled, her heart raced, searching for Nathan Ray's, but he never returned. Life in the cafe resumed its ordinary pace until one fateful afternoon. As Sarah busied herself behind the counter, she overheard murmurs among her coworkers. Big funding from Ray's Industries, one said. Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. Have you not heard? Nathan just launched a new project. They say it could reshape the tech industry, Jenna replied, her eyes alight with excitement. The weight of dread returned. What if he was out for revenge? What if the project had something to do with her? The tension in her chest felt like a heavy stone, but life went on business as usual until one evening, with the sun setting low and casting long shadows through the cafe, Nathan walked through the door. The bell jingled and all eyes snapped toward him once more, the air thick with tension. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Hello again, Sarah, he said, leaning casually against the counter, a slight smirk dancing on his lips. She opened her mouth, ready to unleash a torrent of questions, but words escaped her. He asked, gesturing toward a table in the corner. There was something disarming about his demeanor now, no longer the stormy figure who had walked in before. Sure, she stammered, trying to keep her composure as her coworkers glanced back and forth, fear and excitement mingling in the air. As they settled into the booth, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a negotiation, an unknown that could shift everything. I appreciate you seeing me, he began, resting his elbows on the table, his tone measured and thoughtful. I came to apologize for my earlier behavior. The admission hung in the air, surprising her. You really didn't have to come here to say that, Sarah replied cautiously, her defenses still up. I'm tired of that, he admitted, his voice low. I'm looking for authentic connections. I saw something in you that day, a strength, she asked, skepticism lacing her tone. I want to extend an opportunity, he said, leaning in closer, his eyes earnest. I'm starting a project that I believe needs someone like you. Her heart raced again, this time with a blend of excitement and fear. It's innovative, cutting edge. I can't share too much right now, but I need fresh ideas and I think you'd be a perfect fit, he explained, his enthusiasm contagious. The question tumbled from her lips before she could stop it. Because you stood up to me when no one else would. Most would have cowered. You refused to be a doormat, and that's what I need on my team, he said, a tone of respect lacing his words. Her mind raced, the gravity of his words sinking in. He laughed, the sound unexpectedly genuine. No, as he spoke, she felt her walls begin to crumble. Could this really be a chance to escape the cafe, the life she had known? She asked cautiously. Coming on board as a consultant, helping to drive this initiative forward. We could change an entire industry together, he said, the promise of adventure glimmering in his soulful gaze. The moment hung in the air, thick with potential. Sarah could see herself stepping into something bigger, the fear of the unknown, but also the thrill of transformation. I need some time to think, she said finally, the words low but steady. Of course, just know that I see something in you. Take your time, but don't wait too long, he replied, a hint of urgency in his voice as he slid a business card across the table. With that, he stood, his presence as commanding as ever, leaving her breathless and spinning in the wake of that conversation. Over the next few days, her mind swirled with thoughts of Nathan's proposal. The cafe filled with familiar routines, but the ordinary began to feel extraordinary. The card sat on her nightstand, and every time she looked at it, her heart raced with possibilities. What if she stepped out of her comfort zone? What if this wasn't just a chance to help an industry, but an opportunity to reshape her entire life? Finally, after much deliberation, she dialed the number on the card, a mix of anxiety and excitement coursing through her veins. Nathan answered, his voice crisp. "It's Sarah," she said, taking a deep breath. His voice brightened. "Fantastic, let's meet tomorrow and we can discuss the details." The next day arrived filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Each step toward his office felt like a leap into the unknown, her heart pounding in her chest. But as Nathan welcomed her in with that familiar grin, she felt the nerves fade into a rush of determination. "Welcome aboard," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. They dove into discussions about the project, and each idea, each plan revealed layers of greatness unfolding before them. Sarah felt alive, invigorated, and ready to take on this new adventure. As weeks turned into months, they forged a powerful partnership, marked by challenges and breakthroughs. They worked late nights and celebrated victories together, each moment knitting their paths together until it was hard to distinguish where one started and the other began. But with success came the shadows of doubt. As the pressure mounted from the business world, Nathan occasionally withdrew, the weight of expectations pressing against him. Sarah felt the disconnect, the strain of ambition sometimes clouding his judgment. One evening they worked late into the night, surrounded by blueprints and spreadsheets. As Nathan stared blankly at his computer screen, she decided it was time to confront him. "You're not the same," she said softly, leaning against the desk. His eyes flickered to hers, the light behind them dimmed. I know ambition is important, but you can't lose yourself in this," she pressed gently, wanting him to understand. "I have to win," he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "This is my legacy we're building, but I need you too." At his admission, something changed in the air. "Let's not forget why we started this," Sarah said, her heart pounding in her chest. "We wanted to make a real impact, not just amass wealth or status." He paused, the tension shifting. "You're right, I'm glad you're here to remind me of my purpose," he said, a flicker of a smile returning to his face. With renewed energy, they forged ahead, navigating corporate waters with astonishing finesse. Each roadblock turned into a chance to innovate, their bond growing stronger through shared victories and lessons learned. As their project began to reshape the industry, Sarah couldn't help but feel pride wash over her. The coffee shop seemed a distant memory now, and every time she passed by, the smell of fresh brew ignited a bittersweet nostalgia. On a particularly busy day, while preparing for a meeting that could change everything, Sarah stepped out to grab a breath of fresh air. Leaning against the wall of the building, she glanced at her phone. Her heart raced. Together they had disrupted norms, challenged expectations, and grown in ways she had never imagined. With each passing week, they found strength in their partnership and had become allies in a world that often felt stark and ruthless. And just like that, amidst the whirlwind of success, one thing remained crystal clear. It all began with a refusal to serve a man who thought he could order the universe. That single moment sprouted a journey filled with courage, resilience, and the heart-stopping realization that refusing to bend can sometimes open doors to extraordinary futures. As Sarah stepped back inside, ready for the next big meeting, she felt a sense of empowerment flow through her veins. It wasn't just about the project or the company, it was about living a life shaped by her choices, free from fear. A life marked by her strength, reminding her that sometimes the boldest move one can make is to stand tall and refuse to back down. The cafe door swung open with a jingle and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Sarah looked up from the espresso machine. The familiar sounds of chatter faded away as a man stepped inside. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with an air of authority that made everyone in the room take notice. As he scanned the cafe, a feeling of unease washed over Sarah, sending a chill down her spine. She had served countless customers over the years, but there was something about him that felt different, dangerous even. She asked, forcing a smile while her heart raced. "Coffee, black," he replied without a hint of friendliness, his tone brusque, almost demanding. "Oh, we're out of the dark roast today," she said, glancing nervously at the espresso machine, which was already in disarray. His brows furrowed, irritation flashing in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed through her rising anxiety. "Just the regular brewed coffee, I suppose." Her voice trembled just a bit. He leaned over the counter, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "No, but it's not my fault the machine is down," she shot back, surprising herself with the sharpness of her words. The cafe fell silent. It felt like the world around them had paused, customers holding their breath. Could it be possible she was standing up to him? Did she just refuse to serve a customer? He asked, his tone dropping to a menacing whisper, almost as if he relished the power in his question. "No, I don't," she replied, her voice steady this time, emboldened by a sudden shift in her gut. His expression shifted from surprise to simmering anger. "You should," he hissed, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe, but right now I'm just doing my job," Sarah said, her heart pounding. With that, he straightened up and shot her one last scathing look before striding out the door, leaving the cafe buzzing with a mixture of disbelief and shock. Jenna, her coworker, exclaimed as she rushed over, eyes wide. "He was rude," Sarah replied, holding her chin up. "Rude doesn't begin to cover it. He's Nathan Ray's," Jenna whispered, glancing around as if expecting him to burst back in. A chill settled in Sarah's stomach. She had refused a billionaire. As the weight of that revelation crashed down on her, she glanced toward the door, half expecting him to return, fury etched across his face. Sarah's voice wavered as she pushed around behind the counter, a sense of dread coiling tight in her chest. With the cafe filled with a buzz of muted conversations, she tried to shake off the unease. But days turned into a week, and still Nathan never returned. Business settled back into a groove, and Sarah tried to put the incident out of her mind, but the whispers of the cafe lingered. Jenna said one evening, curiosity etched on her face. An icy feeling washed over Sarah. Could it be possible that Nathan was still thinking about her? What if her refusal had somehow stoked a fire? The implications swirled around her like smoke, creeping into every corner of her mind. One gray afternoon, Sarah was arranging pastries when the door swung open once more. For a moment, her heart leapt, but she relaxed when she recognized a regular. But just as she turned back to the counter, crunching on a chocolate croissant, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps drawing near. No, it can't be, she thought. Trembling, she looked over to find Nathan himself standing there. "Hello, Sarah," he said coolly, an air of confidence enveloping him once more. The cafe had fallen silent again. This time it wasn't just Sarah who felt the weight of his presence. He was back, and the air crackled with tension. He asked, his request smooth, yet laden with underlying urgency. She replied, trying to maintain a facade of strength even as her heart raced. "A chance for you to redeem yourself," he said, a half-smirk creeping up his lips. She tilted her head, skepticism spilling out. "You may not realize it yet," he replied, his tone shifting, a touch more sincere. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Yes," he said, leaning closer, almost conspiratorially. "I admire the fire. Most people just roll over," she asked, wariness creeping back in. "Something revolutionary." The earnestness in his gaze softened the sharp edges of her skepticism. The weight of his words hung in the air between them, magnificently daunting. Sarah's mind raced. The more he talked, the more tempting the idea became, yet the doubts crept back in. "What if I fail? I'm a barista." "Failure is part of growth," he said, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "But fear will hold you back. You've already shown me that you can stand up to me." She felt a swirl of unease and exhilaration, like a knot tightening in her stomach. The idea of escaping her cafe routine sparked something deep within, a flame that beckoned her to take a risk. "Take your time," he said, "but know this, the ball is in your court." With that, he turned to leave, but there was an unspoken promise in the air, an opportunity laced with peril. Days passed, and as her fingers brushed against the card Nathan had given her, hope mingled with fear. She was pulled in two directions, toward safety and comfort, or into the unknown, rich with possibilities. Every moment spent in the cafe felt like a shadow of what could be, and each night she lay awake thinking about how her life could change. Finally, she gathered her courage and called the number on the card. Nathan's tone instantly flooded her with memories of their encounter. "It's Sarah," she said, a tremble in her voice. His excitement was palpable. "Great." The following day, Sarah felt a thick layer of nerves blanket her. Arriving at Ray's Industries, the sprawling corporate building took her breath away. It felt worlds apart from her cafe. When she entered the elegant office, Nathan greeted her with a bright smile. "Welcome to the team," he said, his tone earnest and inviting. She asked, her pulse racing as they sat down. "Revolutionizing sustainable technology," he explained. "It's something I've been passionate about, and we're going to need fresh ideas." As they began to talk, Sarah found herself immersed in the dream he painted. She could feel her nerves giving way to excitement. This was a chance to contribute, to grow, to escape the monotony of life behind the counter. Weeks passed, and slowly, Sarah adapted to the fast-paced environment. She thrived on challenges and found herself collaborating with people who inspired her, who pushed her to think differently. The spark of innovation ignited a fire within her like never before, but it was during one intense brainstorming session that she felt a shift in Nathan's demeanor. He seemed more set on results than the values they'd once talked about. Anxiety coiled in her gut. During a late-night meeting, she decided it was time to confront him. "Things seem different lately," she started, her heart pounding in her chest. Nathan looked at her thoughtfully, but there was an edge of frustration. "This is a competitive field, Sarah. I know, but don't forget why we started," she pressed, feeling the weight of their shared vision. He paused, the fire in his gaze flickering. "Not at the expense of our integrity," she countered, feeling her heart race as the room filled with a charged silence. In that moment, they found common ground again, reigniting the passion that had brought them together in the first place. He nodded, a flicker of gratitude illuminating his features. "Thank you for reminding me," he said, his voice softer now, the tension between them shifting into something more collaborative. With renewed purpose, they dove back into their work, finding their way through the challenges that came with it. As their project gained traction and garnered attention, Sarah felt a sense of pride fill her heart. They were not just creating technologies, they were crafting a narrative, one that could inspire change. As successes piled up, Sarah felt a shift within herself too. She was no longer just the barista who stood up to a powerful man. She was part of something significant, surrounded by a mesh of ambition and vision that had once felt unreachable. But the story didn't end there. One night while reviewing quarterly reports, Sarah received a call from an old friend. Caroline asked, her voice tense. "I just saw the news. They're reporting some shady practices. There are allegations flying around." Her heart sank, trepidation flooding through her. Nathan had gone from being a beacon of change to a figure mired in darkness. The very thought made her stomach twist. The next day, the office felt different. Whispers filled the halls, uncertainty hanging thick in the air. Sarah found Nathan pacing in his office, frustration etched on his face. "Sarah, I need you to help me navigate this," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. Together, they began to formulate a plan, tackling the allegations head-on. They gathered information, ensuring transparency, and reaching out to their clients and partners, reassuring them of their commitment to integrity. As they fought their way through the storm, Sarah felt a sense of purpose return. This was why she had joined him, to stand up for what was right, to challenge the chaos. With each step they took, it felt as if they were reclaiming their narrative, transforming hardships into resilience. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the tides began to shift in their favor. And then came the day everything changed. The media reported a press conference where Nathan stood poised and calm, alongside Sarah, as they addressed the issues head-on, laying everything bare. "This is a time for accountability," Nathan said, his voice strong and clear. Sarah's heart raced as she watched him face the cameras. She felt pride swell within her as they received support from partners and clients who stood by them, affirming their integrity. As the storm passed, Nathan turned to her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you, Sarah." In that moment, Sarah realized how far she had come, how refusing to serve that man had spiraled into a journey of growth and challenge. She had stepped into a world filled with unpredictability, but also companionship and shared energy that had been profoundly fulfilling. Through every twist and turn, she learned that sometimes you have to take risks, stand firm in your beliefs, and fight for what's right, even against insurmountable odds. As she walked out of the building that day, the sun shining brightly above her, Sarah felt empowered. It wasn't just about the work or the project. It was about the woman she had become, a woman who had faced giants, challenged norms, and carved her own path. Everything had changed because she had dared to refuse. And in her mind, she echoed the lesson learned. Sometimes the bravest act is simply standing firm, knowing your worth, and trusting that the future will unfold in the most magnificent ways. The bell above the cafe door jingled, slicing through the soft hum of conversation. Just another morning, Sarah thought as she wiped down the counter. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of pastries. But the moment she looked up, she knew something was different. He walked in like he owned the place. Tall and impeccably dressed in a dark suit, he exuded a kind of confidence that made her stomach flip. Customers stared, their chatter fading into an uneasy silence. She asked, forcing a smile while her heart raced, "Coffee?" "Black," he replied, his voice low and commanding. Her fingers twitched. His brows knitted together, irritation flaring momentarily. "Just the regular brewed coffee," she said, glancing at the espresso machine, which was still simmering from the morning rush. He pressed, leaning in slightly, an almost predatory intensity emanating from him. Something inside Sarah clicked. She felt the itch to back down. She always had, but today was different. Maybe it was the eyes of the customers on her. Maybe it was simply that she was tired of people treating her as if she were inferior. "I can't serve you a latte or espresso because the machine is down." For a split second, she could see the surprise flicker across his face. He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that wrapped around her like a threat. "No, I don't," she replied, steadying her gaze. "And honestly, I don't care." That revelation seemed to hit him harder than she expected. The room was silent except for the clinking of cups. Customers exchanged glances, and Sarah felt their tension vibrating in the air. "Fine, I'll take my business elsewhere," he snapped, turning on his heel to leave. As he reached the door, she heard it, the quiet whispers among the staff. "He's a billionaire." A cold wave washed over Sarah as the realization settled in. She had just refused service to one of the most powerful men in the city. The door swung shut behind him, and the cafe erupted into murmurs. Jenna, her coworker, exclaimed, wide-eyed. "I just thought he was rude," Sarah said, trying to regain her composure. "Rude doesn't even begin to cover it," Jenna pressed, glancing anxiously toward the exit. "I had no idea," Sarah admitted, her heart beginning to pound. "You might want to be careful," Jenna warned. "He doesn't take kindly to being insulted." A wave of nausea rolled through Sarah as she locked up the cafe that night, every sound amplified in her mind. Would he return? What kind of repercussions could she face? But oddly, she felt a flicker of pride. She had stood her ground. That's something right. The next few days were a mix of anxious anticipation and dull normalcy. Customers came and went, the cafe buzzing with life, but Sarah remained on edge. Every time the door opened, her heart raced. She half expected Nathan Reyes to walk in, ready to lay down the law, but he never did. The routine settled back in, but whispers about him still echoed. "He's turning the tech industry on its head," one patron said. Another chimed in. With each conversation she overheard, Sarah felt the weight of her decision cut deeper. What if she had just ruined her own chances? Then one evening, as Sarah was closing up the cafe, the familiar jingle of the door caught her attention. She turned and gasped. It It was Nathan standing in the threshold again, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," he said, his voice low. Her heart raced, a cocktail of fear and anticipation flooding her. "About the opportunity I told you about," he said, stepping further inside. Her mind whirled, unable to process what was happening. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You surprised me, you stood your ground." She blinked, trying to analyze this transformation. "I'm starting a new venture, something innovative. I want you on board. I see potential in you," he said, the demeanor of a man who was both confident and sincere. All the air seemed to leave the room. For a second she was flattered, then the gut instinct kicked in. "Why me?" "That's precisely why," he said, leaning in slightly. "You think differently, you're not jaded by the corporate world." The weight of his words hung between them, heavy and inviting. What if this was a chance to break free from the routine? Yet doubt clawed at her insides. "Failure is part of the game," he replied, his tone encouraging, but being afraid to even try. Every instinct warned her to walk away, to cling to the safety of what she knew. Yet the idea of being a part of something larger, something transformative, teased at her walls. "I'll think about it," she said finally, feeling the determination settle in her chest. Nathan nodded as if he expected that answer. "Take your time," he said, leaving the door open behind him as he stepped back into the world outside, leaving her standing in the cafe filled with the shadows of uncertainty. Days passed into weeks, and the inner battle consumed her. Standing at the same counter, serving the same pastries, she couldn't shake the feeling that something awaited her outside those doors. The fear of not pursuing this opportunity clawed at her mind, frayed her sanity. Finally, she dialed the number on the card he'd given her. His voice crackled through the line. "It's Sarah," she said, feeling her heart race. "Excellent." The next day arrived, igniting potent nerves as she approached the sleek glass building of Ray's Industries. This was a universe she had only glimpsed through the cafe's windows. When she entered, Nathan greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard," he said, a sense of excitement sparking in his gaze. She asked as they found their way to a spacious conference room. "Revolutionizing technology for sustainable living," he shared, his enthusiasm palpable. "I need fresh ideas and bold thinking." As they dove into discussions, the atmosphere shifted, crackling with inspiration. Sarah felt her confidence blossom, feeding off the energy around her. This was more than just a job, it was a chance to create, to innovate, and to be heard. Weeks turned into a whirlwind of experiments and late nights, and Sarah thrived. Ideas flowed, and she felt alive in ways she hadn't before. Working with Nathan transformed what it meant to be a part of something. They faced challenges, collaborated, and celebrated victories, but with success came the shadows of doubt. One evening, Sarah noticed Nathan turning inward, his gaze distant during planning sessions. The pressure of the corporate world loomed over him like a dark cloud. During a break, she mustered the courage to confront him. "You've been distracted lately," she said softly, concern threading through her voice. "I know," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot. Don't lose sight of what we're building here," she urged. He paused, his eyes searching hers. "You're right." In that moment, something shifted again, a fragile understanding growing between them. They refocused on their mission, reigniting the passion that had brought them together. As their project gained momentum and attention, Sarah felt a rush of pride. They were not just working, they were crafting a narrative of impact, one that intertwined their paths. She had refuted doubt and stepped firmly into the light, but the storm was never far behind. Just as they hit their stride, unsettling news broke. Allegations about Ray's Industries began to circulate, whispers of misconduct and shady dealings. Sarah felt her heart drop. She asked, trepidation filling her voice. He exhaled sharply. "I have," he said, his expression tightening. "It could destroy everything we've built," she said, fear coiling within her. "We can't let that happen," Nathan replied, determination flashing in his eyes. Together, they launched into damage control. Crafted statements assured stakeholders of their commitment to transparency. Sarah navigated the storm with razor focus, every decision pulling them closer to their goal. On the day of the press conference, she stood beside Nathan, the weight of the world on her shoulders. The cameras flashed as they faced a sea of reporters, and for a moment her heart raced faster than ever. "We are committed to addressing these allegations head-on," Nathan declared, his voice steady. "We will not shy away from scrutiny." As he spoke, she felt the energy between them solidify. They were partners not just in business but in defiance, fighting for what was right. The road ahead was evident. They had a chance to rebuild trust and reinforce their commitment to change. "Thank you for standing beside me," Nathan said later, a mixture of relief and gratitude etched on his face. "Always," she replied, knowing deep down that they had forged a bond that transcended their initial clash. In the weeks that followed, they both grew into their roles. With every challenge they faced, they strengthened their resolve to seek out authenticity in an industry rife with opportunism. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and rewarding all at once. As she walked through the cafe one evening, memories flooded back, the moments of courage, the decisions that shaped her narrative. The taste of coffee lingered in the air, but now it felt different. "I don't miss those days," she admitted. Nathan nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. Or the moment you came back to offer me a chance, she added, a smile creeping onto her face. Their journey had transformed them both. No longer was she just a barista. She was a powerful participant in a world that demanded resilience and innovation. As their project moved forward, she knew they were on the cusp of something remarkable. Together, they would change not just the industry, but also the very ideals it stood for. Each decision now held weight, and in every meeting she could see how far they'd come, how a moment of defiance had ignited a spark of purpose. The world had shifted, and each day brought new challenges, but Sarah was no longer afraid. With Nathan by her side, they faced the future together, ready to carve their names into the very fabric of the industry. In the depths of her heart, she knew, sometimes the greatest change begins with the courage to say no and step into the unknown. The bell above the cafe door jingled, slicing through the air with a sound that typically signaled comfort and familiarity. Today, though, it felt different. Sarah, busy behind the counter, looked up to see a man enter whose presence instantly altered the atmosphere. He was tall and impeccably dressed, radiating a confidence that felt almost oppressive. The air stilled around him, even the regular customers seemed to sense it. She asked, mustering a smile though her heart pounded in her chest, "Coffee?" "Black," he replied, his tone flat, almost like a command. Sarah hesitated. "I'm sorry, but we're out of dark roast," she said, her eyes flicking to the espresso machine, which was still steaming from the morning rush. He frowned, irritation flashing across his striking features. "Just the regular coffee." She began, searching for a way to salvage the order. "Just coffee." His voice dripped with condescension, as if he found her response amusing. A stir of anger pooled in her stomach, creating a shift inside her. "I can't serve you a latte or an espresso. The machine is down," she said, surprising both him and herself with the defiance in her voice. The cafe felt like a stage. Every pair of eyes turned from their conversations to watch this confrontation unfold. Sarah held her breath, waiting for the storm that was brewing in his eyes to unleash. Asked, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping an octave. "No, and I honestly don't care," she replied, forcing herself to hold his gaze, the words tasting both reckless and liberating. His expression transformed from surprise to a simmering fury, and she could practically feel the tension coiling in the air. The warmth of the cafe turned icy as a collective gasp resonated from the other patrons. "Fine, I'll take my money elsewhere," he snapped, backing away as if she had offended him on a personal level. But just before he reached the door, Sarah caught a whisper from behind her. "He's Nathan Reyes, the billionaire." Her heart sank. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She had just refused to serve one of the most powerful men in the city. Panic raced through her as he stepped outside, leaving a vacuum of tension behind him. Jenna, her coworker, said, incredulous eyes wide, "I don't know." "I just couldn't let him treat me that way," Sarah said, her voice shaky, adrenaline still coursing through her. "People have lost their jobs for less," Jenna warned, looking toward the door anxiously. The cafe buzzed with murmurs, the regulars discussing what they had just witnessed. Sarah felt a mix of pride and anxiety swirling deep within her as she wiped down the counter, the words of her coworkers hanging ominously in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. The days dragged on, each passing moment heavier than the last. Sarah returned to work each day, keeping an eye on the entrance, half expecting Nathan to stride back in outraged. But he never did, and the absence left her unsettled. Then came a week filled with whispers of Nathan. One customer said. The buzz intensified, and with each startling revelation, the dread coiled tighter in Sarah's chest. Her heart sank further each day she entered the cafe, the weight of her defiance looming over her. Each cup she served felt tainted by the fear that he might retaliate. Then one evening after the cafe closed, the bell rang again. Expecting the usual customers, Sarah looked up and froze. Nathan stood there, backlit by the fading sunlight, a steely resolve in his posture. "Sarah," he said, his tone so cool it sent shivers down her spine. Her mind raced. What did he want? She asked hesitantly, wishing she could rewind time to that morning when she might have served him without thought. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside, his eyes never leaving hers. She repeated, keeping her distance. The words hung heavy between them. "Joining my team," he said, leaning closer, a flicker of intensity igniting in his gaze. "You shocked me, and I like that." Sarah's breath hitched. Part of her felt flattered, part of her felt foolish. "Why would you want me?" "I'm just a barista," she replied, skepticism rising. "Exactly," he shot back, the weight of his confidence anchoring him. "You're not jaded by the world of business. You think differently, and I need that." His words swirled around her, a blend of disbelief and excitement. Could this really be an opportunity to escape her mundane routine and make a difference? But that nagging doubt returned. "What if I fail?" "Failure is part of growth," he said, his tone unwavering. "You have to be willing to take risks, but you can't let fear dictate your choices." The tension in the air thickened as the weight of his offer settled over her. A singular question loomed large. Was she ready to step out of her comfort zone? "Let me think about it," she finally said, her voice catching in her throat. "Take your time," he replied, the disappointment barely masked behind his composed facade. As he turned to leave, the door swung shut, echoing with the finality of the moment. Days morphed into long, restless nights, swirling with doubt and hope. Each time she glanced at the cafe, the smell of coffee mingled with memories of her confrontation with Nathan. The possibilities danced in her mind like sunbeams breaking through clouds. Finally, her curiosity overpowered her fear. She dialed the number on the card he had given her, a mix of apprehension and determination pulsing through her veins. His voice rang through the line, steady and professional. "It's Sarah," she said, feeling the weight of her choice settle into her chest. "Wonderful, let's meet tomorrow to discuss everything," he said, excitement radiating through the phone. When the day arrived, Sarah felt a storm of emotions swirling inside her as she approached the sleek building of Ray's Industries. Each step reverberated with anticipation. Her heart raced as she entered, greeted by a sea of polished marble and glass. When Nathan appeared, his eyes sparkling, he beckoned her over. "I'm glad you decided to join us," he said, sincerity echoing in his tone. She asked, trying to quell the torrent of nerves. "Working alongside my team to shape innovative technology geared for sustainable living," he explained. "This is the future, and we need fresh ideas." As they talked, Sarah felt inspiration flooding through her. This was a chance to become a part of something larger than herself. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself navigating the exhilarating chaos of the corporate world. Meetings, late nights, brainstorming sessions, they became her new normal. Nathan stood beside her, guiding her through unfamiliar waters while ensuring she felt empowered. But as the buzz of excitement filled the air, shadows of doubt still lingered. One evening during a late-night meeting, Sarah noticed the fire in Nathan's eyes dim. He dealt with pressure like a seasoned pro, but lately she could sense the burden of expectations pressing down on him. After the meeting, Sarah approached him. "You've seemed distracted." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, visibly stressed. "It's just," the concern creased her brow. "Remember, we're in this together." "Sometimes it feels that way," he admitted, vulnerability creeping into his tone. "I believe in this vision," she said, feeling a rush of determination. "We can't lose sight of why we started." Her encouragement seemed to lift his spirits a bit. "You're right." But as the excitement continued to build around their project, the world outside didn't remain kind. News broke of corrupt dealings at Ray's Industries. Whispers filled the air about invasive practices and mismanagement. The very foundation of what they were building came under fire. Sarah's heart sank when she learned the news, her stomach twisting in knots. She hurried to find Nathan. She exclaimed as she burst into his office. "Yes," he said, anger boiling beneath the surface. That heavy urgency settled in the air. "How do we move forward? We can't let this derail everything," she said, feeling the weight of their mission on her shoulders. Nathan nodded, determination glinting in his eyes. "We go public. We have to acknowledge the allegations and show our commitment to integrity." Sarah felt a swell of pride, realizing they were ready to fight for their beliefs, ready to challenge the shadows that threatened everything they had built. As they prepared for the press conference that could determine their fate, a wave of nerves surged through her. Would the public believe their resolve? Nathan asked, his gaze steady, a reassuring presence amidst the chaos. "Let's do this," she replied, feeling the adrenaline course through her veins as they stepped onto the stage together, facing a room full of reporters armed with cameras and questions. They stood strong, united, committed to telling their side of the story, their belief in change shining through even the darkest moments. But the stakes were high, and as the questions flew at them, uncertainty loomed over the room. Just as Nathan opened his mouth to speak, the doors burst open and a figure stormed in, a man with a determined expression that startled Sarah. "Stop," he shouted, drawing the attention of everyone in the room, including Sarah and Nathan. In that instant, her heart raced, sensing that everything was about to change. What would the man say? What did it mean for their mission, for their lives? The echoes of the cafe, the confrontation with Nathan, the journey they had embarked on, all of it flashed through Sarah's mind, leading her toward an uncertain, gripping future. As the world held its breath in that moment, she knew something monumental was about to unfold.